Hello, chess friends. This is Video Master Valeri Lilov, and we're going to continue with our series on how to meet some of the most irregular and yet unpleasant trappy lines that happen in our games. I mean, it's really interesting that these things come across so easily. I mean, during the last week, I've had quite a few of my students really telling me, Valerie, what do I do against this? What do I do against that? But the most common that was kind of repeating itself was, how do I do against the King's Gambit? I mean, most of the beginner chess players always do e4, e5 when they're black. They responded this way because it's natural and it's kind of good. But the thing is that after e4, e5, when white plays f4, it sounds rather confusing because white usually gives away a pawn for no compensation. And it actually turns out to be pretty good. And when black accepts the pawn sacrifice, white gets a huge initiative. So the real question is, what do we do when the King's Gambit happens against us? And here's the idea. I'm a great fan of the King's Gambit myself as white, and I've played it a lot of times. I have to say that sometimes I've been having a great result. For example, I have a memorable draw, actually, against Grandmaster Levon Aronian, now number 2 in the world. As a matter of fact, I played a blitz game against him on the internet, and I had this amazing perpetual check in the King's Gambit, which was extraordinary. I was white. And I've had some other disasters, actually, when I was white. And I really like it, kind of, but I know that if black plays in the correct way, it really doesn't turn out so well. So, what is the best way to respond to King's Gambit? Now, I gotta tell you that there are plenty of ways how we can respond in a good or a decent way. But the thing is that, I would suppose we have one very important and very effective variation against it. It's called the Nimzowitsch Counter-Gambit. The Nimzowitsch Counter-Gambit starts with d5, and it almost leaves the impression that what we're actually doing is the Falkberg Counter-Gambit. But the truth of the matter is that after d5, actually after e takes to the d, we don't go for e4, which is the Falkberg Counter-Gambit, but we do c6. Okay, before I continue, I really want to give some introduction to what this is. I mean, first of all, let's go with ideas. I mean, again, I used to point out before, and I'm going to point that out once more time. Before we really study an opening, we must know that it's ideas and what it's all about. Because, if you just study the opening because of the theoretical variations, that really isn't going to work. So we need to have a very good idea about the what the main points are, what the main ideas are, and then we study the moves that correspond to these ideas. So first of all, white's plan, we already know. He's sacrificing a pawn just in order to get rid of our own central pawn and get the development quickly. Nevertheless, what you have to do is, instead of accepting the pawn sacrifice and get yourself under a very dangerous attack, my suggestion is that we essentially counterattack against our opponent with d5. And when we get the counterattack with a move like d7 after d5, we make sure that we get rid of those pawns, especially the one on the e4, and we want to take away the initiative from him. Now, I know that this sounds really too good, but it is possible. Let me teach you how. After d5 and e takes d, now why would white take this pawn? Why not the other pawn? Well, you're going to see that in this move and on the other next moves. Essentially, if white plays with f takes to e5, we can do queen h4 with a check, and it's becoming very dangerous that after g3, queen takes e4, queen to e2, and ultimately we can take the rook. That's really bad. See, this is becoming the reason why we can't do this. And so after white plays with the move of e takes to d, essentially, now we do another very interesting move. We don't take the pawn, which is going to put our queen in danger, and we don't just move around with our other pawn, like an e5, pushing it to e4 or something, but we just do the move of c6. So this is the Nimzowitsch Counter-Gambit. It's very strange looking on the first sight, but it has some huge potential behind the simple move of c6. Okay, so what is the reason for a move like c6? Well, in reality, the move of c6 provides white an opportunity not just to keep his material, but even more. it provides him with an opportunity to win a pawn on his own. Now, I know how this sounds. It sounds like, okay, well, why should we do this? It really does not sound like the way to go. But then we realize that with the move of pawn to c6, if white gets to capture this pawn, with, okay, if he plays f takes 2, we can have the same. Queen h4, and even if we're not taking a pawn there, then white was still going to lose his rook, or moving the king will mean that we can just capture, and we can do bishop g4, and the attack is pretty powerful. So ultimately, after we do a move like pawn up to c6, why do we have to take it there? Knowing that maybe that just gave him the chance to win a pawn. This looks great. White's a pawn up, everything looks great. Now don't you worry about it. If you're not a sacrificing type of person, if you don't want to sacrifice as much, you don't worry at all. The thing is that after basically white plays the continuation of d takes to c, knight takes to c, when he goes on for knight f3, we can take back this pawn right away. And you don't have to worry about that at all, because you see, the trouble is that even if he does with d3 or something, then the extra pawn, he can't keep it for a long time. I mean, our initiative is going to be more important than any actual pawn, and that's about it. We can do bishop c5, we can cut off the king from really running safe. And the thing is that after knight takes to the c6, let's say if white plays knight f3, and then we capture on the f4, we just get the opportunity to win a pawn very effectively, and then we can consider developing the rest of our forces, like bishop d6, knight e7, and further on we can even castle on the short side area, and we can develop in a very, very good way. So it's perfect out there. What happened in this moment is that actually after e takes f, white can usually do the move d4, and let's have a look at this. After d4, black plays bishop to d6, white actually continues with bishop d3, and then we can continue with the move of knight e7. Just being able to develop in that exact manner helps black to stand with, first of all has that f4 pawn as a really powerful nail inside the white position. And what we realize is that most of his own pieces, like that knight on the b1, that bishop on c1, and the rook, they're not developed. And why is that important? I mean, he would develop them later. Yeah, but the problem is that the position is open. And something very specific about open positions is that when the position is open, the player who's not that well developed is going to suffer, because he will not be able to hold the tactics and the complications happening. So ultimately, after knight e7, what white can do is to castle on the short side, and then we can just play bishop g4 at this point, so we can pin the knight and hit the pawn in the middle. c3, and right now we've got the opportunity to castle. Now you're going to say, okay, so do we castle like that? I mean, what if white plays bishop takes h7 and all? This looks bad, right? Well, that's a little bit of a trick here, actually. I mean, I would suggest that you don't worry about this. I mean, you don't worry, because no matter how amazing it may sound, you can take that bishop, and after knight g5, no, I'm not kidding, you can get that king up, and after f5, wherever the queen moves, he's actually going to lose this knight, so you don't have to worry, because actually, even if your king goes there and takes the knight, now you're probably going to say, Valeri, you're drunk today, or how can we just do this? I mean, this looks wrong. Well, things in chess are very concrete. So if your opponent doesn't have the power to attack you, you can collect the piece and then get your king back to safety. Now, of course, you don't have to allow that. If you feel scared about this, although I assure you, there's nothing to be feared about. White just has only 2 pieces and not enough potential attackers to do anything. If he still has it, basically what we realize is that ultimately after queen h4 and then rook to h8, it's like we can hit the queen and we can make a lot of problems. But okay, what if white tries to play it properly? So that's just not right for white, or it's not really the right time for him to do that type of a sacrifice. So basically, the better idea is ultimately, when we castle, not to worry about any kind of combinations like that. If you want, you can always do a move like h6 and then castle if you're worried, but that's fine. Now, let's see what happens after we castle and then white plays knight bd2. I mean, obviously, we have to play h6 either way. And the important about this move is that when we do h6, we're going to be kind of ready to set ourselves up for g5. Now, I mean, know that this may sound a little scary at the first sight, but at some point we'll need to defend f4. So I'm not just saying it for now. Right now, all you have to do is make sure you get the development well set, and when the bishop is kind of covering the pawn, then our knight can simply get onto the d5. What's amazing about this position is not so much that black has an advantage. I mean, okay, let's face it, he has an advantage, but it's not about that. It's more that you took away everything. I'm really saying everything that White was really fighting for. What he's fighting out of the opening is just a decent development, an attack, and a possibility for strong initiative so that he can just keep coming after you. So if you take his opportunity to do so by choosing an opening like this one, then you really have taken everything away from him, and this is really important. So basically the idea is that after we do go for a move like, say, pawn to h6 castles, pawn h6, or the other way around, he's got nothing. Let's face it, after knight to the c4, there is bishop to c7. Even if he tries queen to c2, there's rook e8. And some people may try b3 for development, but you know what? Now I've got a pretty nice combo. Like to try and find it? It's a typical idea that Black may consider some strong attacks here against White center. But think about it. You can pause the video and spend a few seconds looking. So how can Black attack or counter against White center at this point? What's his way to do it? Well, you believe that there's only one significant way to do anything like that, and this should be just bishop takes f3. I mean, after bishop takes f3, White will be depraved of anything. If he plays with rook takes f3, we just got knight takes d4 coming. C takes d4, and we realize that there is queen takes d4, with which we can give a check, and that rook is going to be hit. We also realize the fact that after we essentially do knight takes d, there is no way how White can defend whatsoever. So you can't do b3. You can do bishop d2, and that's just about it. You see, making a King's Gambit player to stay passively and behind with his pieces. Now, you can't understand that if you're not a King's Gambit player, and you don't want to be a King's Gambit player if this line happens against you as White. But it's good if you play that line as Black. So, I hope it didn't scare you enough if you like to play the King's Gambit. Yet, after queen to the b3, you'd love this position as Black. So ultimately, after rook to b8, there is queen to h5, there could be bishop e6 and even knight d5 to happen. I mean, what we ultimately realize is that White has every one of his pieces completely ineffective. Now, let me clarify what ineffective is. You see, in chess, there exist two types of pieces. Active, and obviously the opposite is passive. And then there's also effective and ineffective. Now, what's the difference? The difference is that often active means a piece that has quite some squares to control, which is a pretty decent idea. But that's what we call active. And effective is more like a piece that doesn't matter how many squares it controls in particular, but what matters is what it will do and it will have as a part of the plan. You see, as a part of the plan, this bishop on d2 looks like a complete pawn with a hat there. How about that? I had a Canadian student once, and he told me, this is a pawn with a hat, and this is a pawn with a crown, and that is, I don't know what it is, he said, So basically the thing is that every single piece that White has is completely out of the play for the moment, while we can rearrange every single of our pieces the way you want it. Of course, that's not a winning line, but it did the purpose, right? The purpose of this system is to really defeat all White's activity and attacking possibilities, so it can give us good coordination and relevant ways to advance against this king. All right, but how about if he goes differently? I mean, this is the only first way how he could play. Maybe he could try and be more aggressive. Like, what about c4? Well, the problem about a move like c4 is that c4 is going to kind of weaken his center a bit, and then we can just do a move like bishop g4. As a result of that, should White play a move like bishop e2? He can do this, but then we can play bishop takes f, bishop takes f. And you see the move? That's a really bad move to White. That's the queen h4 one. When we do this move, we force his king to go out, while we can actually consider castling, or just play knight g7, so we can castle short. So with that king in the middle and most of his pieces undeveloped, believe me, I would not like to play white here. You wouldn't want to do that either. So I suppose ultimately there's no way we can play c4. There's no good idea to play c3. So what if white actually develops just like knight c3 instead? Well, here's where the fun begins. And after knight c3, bishop g4, and white plays bishop e2, we can just go on. I mean, now it's quite interesting. We can still do this bishop takes f3 and then queen h4 as a line. But, I mean, let's say that white is not going to let that happen. Maybe white can try v5. And in this position, we got this opportunity to give a check. And if he plays queen bishop e2, we've got bishop takes f3, g takes f3, then maybe we could have rook d8 available. Okay, what if he takes that knight out? Well, you know, I think I wasn't completely right when I said that there is fun, because actually there is fun only for black. And white, I don't think it's so funny for him out there. You see, so especially after queen h3, it doesn't look funny at all, don't you think? The trouble is that after a queen e7, even the normal move of queen e2 is still not helping, because after bishop takes f, g takes f, and knight d4, I mean, that one is not too funny either. We see c2 is attacked, f3 is attacked, white pieces are on the backside, the pawn structure is terrible. You know, I can spend 10 more minutes talking about what white doesn't have and how terrible his position is, but I realize that some of you are King's Gambit players, so I don't want to really discourage you so much. So let's get back to the position and go to the bishop d6. So what doesn't white have a move like bishop b5? So maybe some of you will meet that move in the games. So what about if white tries to pin the knight and probably prepare for something of d5 and whatever? Well, you can actually say welcome. If he goes d5, you can really welcome him. You know why? Well, there's something very interesting going on. If you like, you can pause the video and try to find it on your own. Although the move is not really that hard to see. It's just one. I don't believe that the pawn on the d5 is going to do as much. So I think that the right way is to take it. See, the trouble is that as soon as we just capture on this d5 square, he can't take it back, because if he gets to take there with his own queen, we're going to continue with the move of bishop b4 with a check, and then we can have queen takes d5. That's going to leave him in a horrible position. Well, lost position, completely lost. Get lost. So, anyway, white doesn't have the ability to play d5 yet. He can castle, and yet after castles on our short side, and knight c3 perhaps, and we can even go for bishop g4. We just see what we want. Space, control, beautiful prospects, and a lot of powerful opportunities. I mean, now you can just go a6, and if white plays like bishop a4, knight d5. Look at that. Now, every single piece that black has in this position is right into the play, and even if he loses the pair of bishops, don't worry at all about that. It's like white's bishop pair is going to be very much restricted while we just keep improving our own pieces. And the e3 square looks like the perfect opportunity for our knight. If it goes there and white exchanges it, you can fix that double pawn. Although it's a very good pawn, don't get me wrong, it's a beautiful pawn, but you can fix it by being able to take on e3 with it and turn it into a real monster, you know, inside the white position. Pawn nail inside there. So I think white is not in a good mood. And one thing I can guarantee you about that type of position is that you have plenty of opportunities. Now, don't only take for granted what I give you as ideas of knight e3. You can figure out many more. It's a position in which you can be creative. It's a position in which you can just figure out what's the best way to go. I mean, here are some sample lines to make it easier for you. There's the knight coming to f5 and then e3. There's an opportunity for you to do, I mean, you can think about playing queen g6 and bishop to h3. There's an opportunity for you to transfer the knight a little bit in the center like that and encounter response with b5, b4, which is going to attack him out there. There are plenty of beautiful opportunities. And above all, in all these positions, white is going to stand behind and wait until you're going against him. It's too good, right? Too good, but it is true. So try it out and you will see how actually there's just as many as my students who've been trying that system. You will no longer experience King's Gambit as an actual problem in your games, and you happen to feel very well as black in a time when your opponent chooses to play it against you. Thanks again, and I hope that this line turns out successful and good for you.